Hello and welcome everyone to the League of Women Voters of the Lacrosse Area and our October Lunch and Learn program. I am Karen Kroll. I am the Vice President of our local league. I am sitting in today for Robin Schmidt. Robin is our president and she will return in November for that Lunch and Learn and be the co-host. Well, of course, we look forward to the day when we can again hold in-person lunch and learns, where we get to listen to exciting speakers that our program committee has engaged, and we get to interact with one another and be served a lovely lunch. But since that's not to be as yet, I'm trying to follow the advice of others who tell me that I should not focus on the things I can't do, but focus on the things I can do. So we can, for example, engage program speakers that maybe we might not otherwise been able to have due to distance issues or other complications. We can relax in our own comfortable homes and eat a lovely lunch of our own making. And we can still interact with one another today through the question and answer portion of the program, as well as a poll that we're going to ask you to join us on later on. So let's focus on what we can do. Pour yourself another cup of coffee, sit back and relax, and engage with your Lacrosse Area League of Women Voters and also our two special guests and community leaders who will be Lacrosse Police Chief Shawn Kudron and Lacrosse County Sheriff Jeff Wolf. But before we do that, let me show you something else. We need to do a little business with you to go over with you. And I think we can all see that slide, I hope. Yeah. So do you feel like you'd like to engage with the league and with our community even more, but you're not sure how, especially with everything going on today? Well, our Lunch and Learn programs are just one way to do that. We encourage you to check out our awesome website where we have an event calendar here under programs and events that you can click on and find league events and community events that you might be interested in. And over here are ways to engage. If you click on that, you'll see even more options for staying connected and involved, such as, for example, volunteering with voter services. And we have discussion groups, book club, our newly reinstated Observer Corps, all of which are just some of the ways you can participate and keep up with what's going on in the greater Lacrosse area. So if you want to, you can also watch those programs like this one later on under programs and events here. You will be able to watch a recording. So now let me go on to the next. If you attended last month's Lunch and Learn, you found out about a new, exciting, and very interactive program we have. Each of you will have the opportunity, if you wish, to actively participate in a Lunch and Learn follow-up discussion group to be held at a later date. The discussion groups give you a chance to engage in more interactive conversations. If you've ever been to a program and you hear a speaker and you get very excited about something you've heard and you'd like to talk to others more, maybe take some action down the road, this is a way you can potentially do that. Dive deeper into those topics presented at our Lunch and Learn programs. Now, we will gauge your interest in this through a very short poll you will see on your screen towards the end of the presentation today. Then after today's webinar, if there's enough interest in a particular topic, we will try to arrange an evening Zoom meeting in the next few weeks where we can continue the discussion in more detail. Yes, it's Zoom again, but last month we held our first discussion group following the September Lunch and Learn on the Criminal Justice Management Council. And we're pleased to announce that this endeavor was a wonderful success. We had a good number of participants, 2 breakout sessions, and it was very informative and very much enjoyed. So if you think you might want to join in the discussion group later this month, watch for that poll in the program where you can help us select discussion topics related to today's exciting presentation. Now, in just a moment, League board member Ellen France will again provide us with brief legal updates on current events. And then our program committee chair, Mary Nugent, will be introducing our two expert and exciting panelists. Also, we look forward to your participation in this program today. If you have questions for Ellen or later our panelists, please type them into the Q&A, the question box at the bottom of your screen. Mary will be monitoring the question box after the panelists have concluded the initial part of their discussion, and she will allow some time for her to ask your questions. All right, the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We are political, but we are nonpartisan, as we do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. All right, now Mary, would you like to start us off with our program?
Certainly, thank you, Karen. Hello and welcome to everyone. I'm Mary Nugent. I'm the program committee chair. And as Karen stated, we will start out with an update from Ellen France and on what is happening in the courts and legislature. Ellen.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Okay, so there are two tracks traveling in Wisconsin. One is in our court system, one is in the investigations into the past election. The two federal court cases brought by Democrats leaning organizations, including one of them brought in part by the Wisconsin League of Women Voters, are in federal district court. They have been consolidated, and they also, the other side has filed a petition with the United States Supreme Court asking that the federal lawsuit be blocked. The Wisconsin Supreme Court track, which was started by the Republicans, or in the legislature and in their cohorts, the status has changed recently in that the Wisconsin Supreme Court has agreed by a 4-3 decision to hear the lawsuit. The most recent happening was October 7th, where the federal court, because of the action of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, said that they will partially pause this Wisconsin redistricting case, but it will be available to decide the election redistricting issue if needed. They are continuing to plan for a January trial, and the federal court had this to say: federal rights are at stake, so this court will stand by to draw the maps should it become necessary. The court recognizes the responsibility for redistricting falls first to the states, and that this court should minimize any interference with the state's own redistricting efforts. But the Wisconsin Supreme Court did not commit yet to drawing new legislative or congressional maps, and has not yet set a schedule to do so, or even to decide whether it will do so. So we still have the two tracks. How it's going to proceed and who's going to do what when remains a question. The other thing that is happening, of course, is the investigation into the past election. The one that was attempted to be started by Representative Branchin, asking for a forensic audit, that is kind of nothing's happened with that. There is a nonpartisan audit bureau review taking place, and the results of that should be available later this fall. And finally, there is the Gableman review, And you may have seen late last week that he had issued subpoenas to the clerks to bring volumes of information of the 5 cities that received funding for elections from outside parties. And the mayors of those jurisdictions, and they were to appear, boy, I think it might have been later this week or next week, before Gableman and answer to whatever records they might have. Late last week, there was something in the media that said, well, no, he's not going to make you bring everything that date, and we're going to kind of stop and, ask for more limited information. But since then, apparently Gableman has then said, no, we're going ahead. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. The subpoenas were issued by Voss. Some people are arguing that they're still not okay, and what are people supposed to do in response? So that's kind of a interesting process, I'll just say that. So those are the things that are happening with redistricting at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I don't see any questions at this time, but if you do have questions on any of these, feel free to write them in the Q&A at any time, and we can come back to Ellen. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right. We're going to move on to our guest panelists now. Okay, today we're fortunate to have Sheriff Jeff Wolf and Police Chief Shawn Kudron today as our panelists. Both have extensive law enforcement experience in the Lacrosse area. Sheriff Wolf has been employed by the Sheriff's Office since 1988 and was elected sheriff in 2018. Lacrosse Chief of Police Shawn Kudron has been a law enforcement officer for 23 years and was appointed chief in 2019. Welcome, Sheriff Wolf and Police Chief Kudron. We'd like to start out today with a brief outline of your duties and responsibilities in your organizations. And we'll start with Sheriff Wolf. Sheriff, you are muted.
How's that? Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Well, thank you for having us here today, and look forward to your questions and topics. They are some very important topics that you've highlighted, and we'd be happy to talk about them. So, like you said, I've been sheriff for about 2.5 years, elected in the fall of 2018. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for all 33.5 years of my career, working in the patrol division, investigations, 12 years as the chief deputy, overseeing the budget and employment matters primarily, as well as policy, and then now as sheriff. So the Sheriff's Office has roughly 120 employees in 3 different divisions, including the jail division, patrol division, and investigative services. We provide law enforcement services to all the rural, unincorporated areas of Lacrosse County, as well as provide services to the municipal jurisdictions that do not have full-time police coverage or need assistance on a frequent basis. That division is also responsible for, we have a training division, we've got DARE officer, we've got process service, serve all the legal process, office staff. We have reserve deputies that do transports of inmates to state prison systems, appointments in various locations throughout the state. Our jail division, we've got, as you may or may not be aware, have a jail that holds roughly 260 inmates. We've been as high as recent as probably 6 months prior to COVID of 216 inmates. Our average population was pretty consistent of 184 prior to COVID. And then since COVID, we've been on a pretty consistent average of about 100 inmates. Our investigative division does various types of drug investigations, juvenile, child abuse, child sexual assault, drug investigations, crimes against property, crimes against persons, so forth. So it's a pretty complex operation. Each division has a captain that oversees the division, sergeants that are on duty daily for supervision, and then the chief deputy and myself. So if there's any questions related to that, I'd be happy to answer them. And thank you for having us.
Thank you. Police Chief Kudron.
Thank you. Again, I just want to echo Sheriff Wolf's comments on having us here today. It's definitely a great opportunity for both of us to speak with you today. And again, the topics that will be highlighted are certainly of interest and important for our community. So I have been the chief of police now for just over 2 years, and became chief of police in 2019. I've served as a law enforcement officer for just over 23 years. I actually started my my law enforcement career in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, where I had been hired. I worked there for about a year and a half and had the opportunity to come here to Lacrosse. I was offered a position with the Lacrosse Police Department, and I've been here in Lacrosse since 2000. So I have worked in a number of different areas within our department, our field services division, our community or professional standards division, as well as our investigative division. And our department consists of, similar to Jeff's, around 120 employees. We're down a few employees on our civilian side, as well as our sworn side. But typically, we're operating between 120 and 125 employees. We are allocated 99 sworn officers, and we have a similar setup as the Sheriff's Department, except for the fact that we do not have a jail to operate. We have a field services division, which is our uniformed police officers that are patrolling and responding to calls for service within our community. We also have an investigative services division that investigates and follows up on incidents that occur throughout the city. That division is made up of a sensitive crimes division, which is oftentimes crimes against children, crimes committed by children, but all things that have to do with those types of crimes. We also have a drug enforcement division within our investigative bureau or drug unit. We also have a general crimes and a white crimes or white collar crimes division, you could call it, financial crimes division, and really they encompass a lot of other work that comes in that needs follow up as well. We do have a professional standards division, which does a lot of our community outreach, but also does our public information. So many times if you see a story on the news or information that the media is seeking, it is our professional standards unit that is providing that information. We also have our administrative staff, which is made up of our records bureau, and as well as our parking utility, which is our employees that oversee and operate our parking enforcement, as well as all of the parking ramps within the downtown area. So on average, our agency responds to about 150 calls for service a day. And that equals out to roughly on average 1,000 calls per week. And we stay quite busy. And this previous weekend before last, Oktoberfest, during that weekend, we had about, I think the media had just recently reported, but about 900 calls for service between Friday and Sunday. So we were busy, and we had a lot of people in our community, but it was a great Oktoberfest weekend, and it was very safe, and things went quite well. So although we were busy, we were very pleased with how the entire weekend turned out for our community, those visiting, those that call Lacrosse home, celebrating Oktoberfest. So With that, I just want to say thank you again for having us today and look forward to answering questions.
Thank you very much. All right, just another reminder to our attendees that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat, but in the Q&A. Thank you. Okay, this past year, the events of this past year have spotlighted law enforcement agencies and practices. How has this increased public scrutiny as well as community changes affected your departments in your officer training? Let's start with Police Chief Kudron.
Thank you. So the events of the past several years have certainly been front and center for law enforcement across the country, as well as our agencies here locally. And you know, one of the main things that the public scrutiny on law enforcement really provided us with opportunities. These were opportunities to not only look within ourselves to where we can improve, but also highlight the things that we have been doing as the Lacrosse area. Oftentimes we look at ourselves as being, you know, leaders within the state and ahead of the curve when it comes to some of the improvements that law enforcement is going through. As I came in to being the police chief, one of my goals for the agency was to improve transparency. We had a lot of efforts that were in the works just prior to a lot of the things that had happened across the nation that kind of started with the public scrutiny. And that transparency really allowed us to look at some of the areas that we wanted to communicate more with the community that we're serving. Obviously, with social media and you know, virtual technology, we wanted to be able to put as much information as we could on our website, and we were able to do that in fairly short order because a lot of this information was in the works to put it on our website, and we had been building a new website for that. Our website has a transparency tab. You can see many things from calls for service, our training, demographics, budget, and overtime, annual reports. We have a specific professional standards report. And one of the things I wanted to highlight is we put our general order, our policy manual on our website, but we had also been doing this for nearly 20 years. So if you notice, one of the things that has been called for during this time, during this public scrutiny, has been to see the policies that law enforcement and law enforcement and policing agencies abide by. And we've been offering that up to our public now for several years. So those are a few of the things from the transparency side. The other challenges in terms of affecting our department is we did see some protests and demonstrations here locally, as we had across the nation. And you know, in each different area of the nation, we saw a lot of different things, from you know, severe violence to really what I believe we saw here locally. And it was an opportunity for, you know, members of our community to march, to come together, to make, you know, want to have their messages heard. And what we did locally is we really reached out in an engaging style to people who were planning the demonstrations and the protests, and made it known prior to that we wanted to work with them. We wanted to provide them with an opportunity, and we did not want to have any type of situation where it was going to look as if we were clashing with our citizens. And I think that engagement and that, you know, that discussion back and forth really made for a better situation all the way around. And my philosophy for our department is community engagement and building those relationships with our stakeholders. And this, you know, this again, as a question, as this public scrutiny has really provided for more opportunities for that community engagement. And we certainly have work to do, but that is something that we believe is very, very important, and something that we want to continue to do to just improve on how policing and how we serve our community. So with that, I would take any questions, or otherwise turn it over to Sheriff Wolf.
All right. I think we do have a couple questions, but I think we're going to keep those until the end. Okay, Sheriff Wolf, thank you.
No, I would kind of a lot of the same concerns and approaches that Chief Kudron took, we did as well. One thing, you know, when protests and some of that and anti-police issues were coming up, whether it was chokeholds or the use of tasers or search warrants or what have you, we were like right in the middle of the pond on COVID. It was something we were dealing with every day. And then we were struck with another concern of our communities that we had to react to. And it caused a lot of our staff to step up and realize that there's more work to be done in more ways than one. One thing we did was we looked at all of our training related to various use of force, both our policies and how we were training and how often, to make sure we felt we were being compliant with not only what we thought we needed, but within state guidelines. We also, while we weren't involved in any of the protests, because Lacrosse PD handled it in Lacrosse, there was a number of issues going on statewide, and it didn't cause us, but other agencies needed our help. On numerous occasions, we sent staff to Madison to assist because we have officers that are trained in alert or emergency response. So we assisted several other agencies, including West Allis, during some protesting they had. But it caused everybody, we looked at a lot of things related to COVID and our readiness and equipment and how we were prepared for something that we were dealt that we weren't expecting. And in general, we came out, we were very happy. We were well prepared on a lot of things. And early in my career, we were always reactive to everything that went on. I think law enforcement in general has gotten more proactive with policies and training and understanding the citizens we serve. And it just, the occurrences over the last year and a half just made us all busier, but we were very satisfied with how we responded.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And I think we already kind of demonstrated this, but how do the different law enforcement agencies cooperate between themselves? And how do you work with other public institutions like the schools, human services departments, those types of things? And Sheriff Wolf, let's start with you.
Yeah, so we've got very good relationship with all the agencies in the county. I would say Chief Kudron and myself have a great relationship, and we work together on many issues, sometimes things we can't handle by ourselves or what have you, but all the agencies in the county, we do a great deal of training. We do different grants together for the benefit of all our communities. We work with several local agencies, civic clubs, groups, our human services, all law enforcement in the county is very active with them to investigate various child abuse cases and sensitive crimes and so forth. For several years, we've been involved and partnered with human services in the Safe Kids Coalition for over 15 years. And then we've all got good working relationships with several state agencies, including the State Patrol, the Department of Justice, the State Crime Lab, various projects and things we work on with them, as well as federal agencies, including some you may not think of, but our postal inspectors, our railroad police, Social Security Administration. We've got many contacts. There's a lot of resources throughout the state that we work with, train with, because smaller, agencies and smaller counties don't necessarily have all the resources they need, so.
Thank you. Have to unmute myself. Chief Kudron?
Yeah, thanks. And again, many of the same goes for our agency as well as far as many of the places that Sheriff Wolf had mentioned. The different law enforcement agencies cooperating between themselves. I can tell you too, I mean, as we have taken over, our respective agencies, we've worked together, very closely in the past in our different roles. So Sheriff Wolf and I have worked, very closely together, but we've also used our good working relationship to bring in, professionals and agency heads from the other law enforcement agencies within Lacrosse County. And we have a really good working relationship where we're sharing information with each other, looking at challenges that each agency is facing, and how we can solve those challenges together, basically pulling collective knowledge together as far as how we're serving the greater Lacrosse community and Cooley region, and being able to do it in the best way possible. One of the things that we've talked a lot about recently is mental health, and really the increase in calls that we deal with when people are in mental health crisis. And that has been something that law enforcement has dealt with for a long time. But really our relationships with service organizations and working with those that are experiencing crisis is something that has really evolved in the last couple of years. Currently, we are about 6 months in to a brand new program that we have established within our police department, our community resource unit. And that community resource unit is a co-responder program. We work hand in hand with Lacrosse County Mobile Crisis, and we're really looking at ways of responding to those that are in mental health crisis that, number one, get them the services that they need, and number two, to try to do our best to divert individuals away from the criminal justice program and really get to the core factors that may be causing their behavior, and really bringing them, number one, to the police and people calling on individuals and their behavior, but also then what does it take to get them services, and that can be very challenging. I think as many of people probably tuning in today realize that our mental health system is it's far from perfect, and it's something that we are all working as professionals to do the best that we can for our citizens that need that help. So in terms of really working together, this is something that law enforcement wants to find the best solutions for, whether it's the city of Lacrosse, city of Onalaska, village of Holman, or it's the sheriff's department responding to their areas of patrol. And we're talking on a consistent basis to try to find the right templates in that response to bring the right services as quickly as possible to address those needs.
Thank you. Thank you. There's been a lot of emphasis lately on the importance of DEI. What are your goals for addressing the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And along with this, what areas of your training addresses these issues? Let's start, Sheriff, or not Sheriff, I'm sorry, Police Chief.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, as a matter of fact, we have goals that include the issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and those goals really come from a couple of different factors, and it mentions in here training, and that's one of the first ones that we look at, and that has been highlighted over the last few years, kind of going back to the first question with public scrutiny. And a couple of the trainings that we have highlighted here within our agency, and really the first one that is kind of a joint venture with the Sheriff's Department, is fair and impartial policing. This is a training program that really looks at bias and looks at how police officers are doing their jobs, what environmental factors may be impacting decisions that they're making, and really understanding that everybody can have implicit bias, and how you work through that to justly do your job from really that standpoint of procedural justice. Both of our agencies have taken this to the level of having members of both of our departments trained as trainers. So we can then take this educational component and in-house train it to all of our staff. The Sheriff's Department has gone down the same direction with that. And just recently, we've had the opportunity of doing a community training for fair and impartial policing, where Madison's retired Chief Noble Ray came to the Lacrosse community and provided this training to I believe we had nearly 40 individuals from our community be able to come to this training for an afternoon and really go through this, so there's an understanding of how our police department is training when it comes to the areas of fair and impartial policing and implicit bias. Another training that we have also looked at, and not only looked at, but we've had just about, I believe, 20 to 25% of our staff take part in is the YWCA's racial justice training. And we found that to be very valuable. And we've also found that I believe they call it their First Friday events, which is ongoing community conversations. We've had some members of our agency that have been able to take part in that as well. And also members of the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, as well as the DA's office here locally, were able to take part in a pilot program put on by UWL on a human rights policing class. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a 6-week-long class. It was a pilot program that that UWL was working through. It was a good class. It was a very interesting class. We had several members of our department take that class. And it was at the same time that members of the Sheriff's Department, as well as other agencies within our community or within our greater Lacrosse community, had officers take part in. One of the interesting things about that is, as we learned about these topics in human rights policing, we were able to communicate with one another. And it's something that I think was really beneficial for many of the people that took part in that training. But we also look at diversity and equity and inclusion, specifically when we get to the diversity as far as diversifying our staff and making sure that we as police officers are representative of the community that we serve. And I know that at this point in time, across the board, recruiting for police officer positions, sheriff's deputy positions is challenging. We're seeing less and less people apply to become police officers, and we are looking for quality candidates across the board. And so those challenges in policing impact how we recruit, the levels and ways that we recruit as we're moving into more and more of a virtual and social media society. We need to be able to tap into those areas to get people's attention and bring them to our community to want to serve our community. We also look at just individuals who have been born and raised here in the Lacrosse community and have that, that feeling of service and wanting to serve their community. We want to reach out to them because we want them working in policing. We want them serving their community and keeping their community safe. So those are areas that are very important to us. Looking at being able to hire individuals who are from underrepresented communities and areas within the Cooley region, as well as recruiting for female police officers as well, and trying to diversify our staff the best that we can.
Thank you. Sheriff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Chief Kudron kind of hit on several of our joint ventures that we've been working on. One thing was probably around 2001, 2002, all the agencies in Lacrosse County, police agencies, developed a policy on racial profiling. There were some hot topics at the time to do with profiling, and we were kind of the leaders in developing that policy, which has been adopted by many agencies statewide and improved upon to follow best practices and national standards. And so for several years, we've been working on DEI issues before they even were in the news every day. For probably 15 years now, law enforcement, including the Sheriff's Department, has included diversity training in our annual in-service, which is 24 hours mandated training, various topics, but we've included diversity training. I think for those of you know them, Dempsey Miller and Richie Johnson were like the first two that we brought in. It's not easy bringing in people from the community, but it's been very well receptive by law enforcement and even the instructors. We've done a number of diversity training with them and the African American community, Native American, Asian, LGBTQ, several of them we bring in, and it's not always comfortable for everybody, and we understand that, but everybody leaves with a better understanding, and we've done that for 15 years. We'll continue to do it, relying on our community people and improve those relationships, and I think that's went a long way in our community. And as Chief Kudron said, we can our leaders. It's things like that that we have done. Many of them on our own, not my ideas, but people have come up with, and to improve on that. And then and as well as the fair and impartial policing that we talked about, that we stepped up. And we also have instructors on gender response training, crisis intervention training, substance use disorders. So we've got a lot of instructors, a lot going on, and it's all about trying to improve on our training and abilities to serve those in our communities.
Thank you. Appreciate your efforts. Sheriff Wolf, we're going to start with you because I think this question kind of relates more to you. What programs does law enforcement participate in that would address the issues of recidivism, mental health, and well-being for jail inmates?
Okay. I'm guessing several in your group and those that are in various other community groups have heard from our jail program coordinator. So we've got a jail program coordinator assigned full-time to the jail. I think we're one of the few on this side of the state that has such a position. But Mike Kiefer is our program coordinator, and he provides either organization to the trainings or programs, or does them himself, or recruits volunteers. But we have over 30 programs in our jail that we provide to inmates. Most all of them, I think, are related to recidivism. They include AA, Narcotics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, dual diagnosis, coping skills, parenting skills, and so forth. A lot of those are the issues that individuals probably came to jail. And if we can make a change or offer some resources or suggestions prior to getting released, that maybe we can reduce some of the recidivism. One thing we see a lot of recidivism is on drug offenses, and those that have been involved in the recovery world know that at some point most everybody fails. It's to try and keep them on that consistency of normalcy. And so one thing we have done in the jail, which I will take part of the credit for, is several people come to jail and they're on some type of program for their addiction, whether it's Suboxone or what have you, and they go to a clinic and get treatment. One thing we've done is we've started a group to oversee those inmates, along with our healthcare workers and our various counselors, is to keep those people on the program when they're in jail, because if they miss appointments, they have to start all over, and we know that that is not successful. We've been pretty successful on the Vivitrol and Suboxone and what have you programs, getting inmates either what they need while they're in jail or getting them 2 appointments daily to continue that. And the main goal is recidivism. At some point, something has to change, and we're hoping that that's one thing that we can do. Lastly, one more thing we do with programming and in the jail and all related to recidivism is we started in partnership with Aramark Food Service, who provides meals to the jail. We started a Serve Safe program so that inmates can go through the 16-hour program, receive a certificate in Serve Safe, which allows them to work in the restaurant industry upon release from jail. And I think we've ran 3 classes now, and we've got over 30 graduates of it. So we're hoping that opportunities outside of jail will improve on them coming back to jail. And I'm not sure how we'll monitor it, but hopefully a program such as this will be successful.
Thank you. I'm going to, Sheriff Wolf, I'm going to follow up with that with a question that is near and dear to our hearts, which is voting. So what processes do you have to ensure that eligible inmates can vote?
Yep. So we do have a policy in a jail. It is very brief, but it basically says that inmates are entitled to vote. The sheriff has to designate somebody to oversee the process, and on an annual basis, the jail captain and the program coordinator, as well as the jail chaplain, all work together to ensure that we can do whatever possible to get inmates the opportunity to vote. One of the biggest hurdles we face is our jail population in general is only incarcerated for, on average, somewhere between 3 and 5 days. It isn't like the state prison system where they know when they're going to be released. We never know when they are. So that's always a hurdle, but we do our best to accommodate, but frequently they're released before the voting process even occurs. But we do have a process. It's part of the jail rules. All the inmates are provided the rules in multiple formats. They know that if they want to vote, they can contact any one of those individuals or put a request in on the kiosk that they want to vote. We assist them in determining residency because obviously that would determine where they receive their ballot, not necessarily from, but what they get to vote on and so forth. They have to have a form of ID. If they've got one in their property, we will assist in getting it out of their property within the jail, making copies. We get their registration form. They complete that. We ensure that it gets sent to the county clerk, get them registered. It varies from year to year. Obviously, the bigger the elections, the more there are, but it's usually only a handful, and it's because they know they're going to be there come election day, so they start the process. But we do everything we can to accommodate them. I know it's near and dear to you, and it's been kind of a hot topic with other groups throughout the state, and a lot of surveys on what jails do, but we do accommodate them, but it is usually just a small number that do wish to vote.
Thank you. Thank you. And I didn't mean to ignore you, Police Chief. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to either of the questions on the jail inmates?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the issues surrounding recidivism, mental health, and the well-being of jail inmates, it is something that, you know, our agency is certainly involved in. And at times, the sheriff and I have worked together at some of this, and I may take a little bit of a different direction on this because it kind of goes back to during the pandemic. And Sheriff Wolf and I, really worked together on, looking at different ways in which our system does incarcerate individuals that, are, suspected of a crime, depending on what that activity is. And, there was a lot of concern just across, not only our profession, but just across our community and society in general during the pandemic and COVID-19. And we worked through some different processes that we worked with the sheriff's department as well as the courts, all of us working together to make sure that we're still doing our due diligence at looking at community safety, but also utilizing what is called a signature bond and reducing some of the individuals that actually go to jail or would be incarcerated for a certain level of criminal offense. And that really has accomplished several things. It's accomplished an opportunity of, not having to take somebody into custody as often. It reduces some of the numbers associated with the jail populations that Sheriff Wolf had previously talked about. And we still have been able to then maintain that accountability factor through our DA's office and the court system. And both Sheriff Wolf and I found, a lot of benefits by doing that. And through these kind of ebbs and flows of the pandemic, we've maintained that practice in certain areas because we think it's best practice. And also at times, not having to take somebody's liberty away from them in terms of taking them to custody lessens the chance of confrontation, which keeps, our officers healthier and less likely to become injured, as well as any of the citizens that we may be dealing with. So I just wanted to mention that as an opportunity where our system has worked together through the challenges of the pandemic. And I think it's just a better approach for our entire community. With that, when we talk about, recidivism and mental health, I mentioned it before, but, our community resource unit is really focusing on calls for service that have a great nexus to mental health. And even some of our community partners that we've dealt with have asked us, well, why is this individual just not taken to jail? And we've really tried to evolve in this area to say, listen, we are looking at that underlying issue, that mental health crisis that may be resulting in that behavior, and trying to address that better. Part of our community response or resource unit is not only to deal with individuals in crisis, but also to follow up with them when they're not in crisis, to try to find out how we can best work with them so that they avoid those situations where the police department or sheriff's department might be called. And we found some really good success with that, even in the short amount of time that we've been able to get this unit up and running. And we found some ways of connecting social services as well and get them communicating with one another. That's worked really well for the consumer. And it's mitigated and lessened those crisis situations where police have been involved. Now, again, it's far from a perfect system, but we're trying to find ways to do this differently to serve our community better. And hopefully, with this reduction and mitigating these crisis responses, we are also lessening that behavior that may be deemed as criminal behavior or may need to be pursued, let's say with a ticket or an arrest, depending on what's happening. We always have to balance that behavior with victimization and what may be happening within our community. But these evolved approaches to people that are experiencing mental health crisis, I believe is helping. And again, we're on the very front end of doing some of these things differently. But I think ultimately it's going to result in better services provided to those who are suffering from mental health crisis, as well as those that are suffering from addiction as well. With that being said, also both of our agencies are involved in many of our court programs, drug court, veterans court, OWI court, and we are providing information and and being actively involved in the different processes with those courts, with all of that really lending itself to reducing recidivism. And it's been our philosophy within our police department that we want to pursue people that are dealing drugs, that are bringing drugs, bringing this poison into our community or dealing this poison in our community. But we want to seek help for those that are suffering from addiction. And we want to work with our district attorney's office to divert criminal charges for those that are addicted and get them the services that they need to kick those addictions. Again, that process is not always smooth, but we certainly want to be pursuing and putting our resources into those that are dealing those drugs and facilitating those addictive behaviors for many of the people within our community. So those are also ways that law enforcement and both the Sheriff's Department and Police Department are able to work with our criminal justice system, with our community, to hopefully in the long run reduce recidivism rates for those individuals.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Now, couple more questions, and then we have a slew of questions from the Q&A. But what do you see as the most significant challenges to your departments, and what significant opportunities do you see to meet these challenges? And start with Sheriff Wolf.
Okay. Chief Kudron just talked on, probably because we spend so much time on it, the mental health issues. I have no doubt are going to continue to be one of our main challenges. Individuals get caught up in the criminal justice system. Yeah, they maybe have committed a crime, whether they stole a car or busted a storefront window or what have you. But if the underlying issue is mental health issues or what have you, we at the jail understand that the jail probably isn't the best place for them. And several people on here have probably heard previous sheriffs say that the Crosse County Jail is the largest mental health provider in the county. And that isn't right. So it's a challenge that several of us and different groups, CJMC and what have you, have been working on, is try to utilize the resources, understand the resources we have in the community, and get those people into that system rather than the criminal justice system. It isn't just the jail. Our staff responding to calls deal with mental health issues on a daily basis, and the lack of bed space for individuals on what we refer to as a Chapter 51, which is a mental health commitment. There just are no beds available, and what do we do with these people, or treatment facilities, what have you. So I would say if we're going to narrow it down to what challenges face our departments, everything's mostly related to mental health. I'm convinced that the drug issues that we face in our community is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. We haven't put ties to it yet, but the increase in fentanyl and meth and heroin is coming, which leads to mental health or dual diagnosis issues. So I believe that's a challenge on the forefront, and we'll continue to work on what we can to address those issues, but it's going to take a village to solve those problems. So.
Thank you. Police Chief Kudron.
Yeah, thank you. And the first one that I kind of had on my notes here is again mental health. And so I know I've talked a lot about that today, and I'm sure I've been able to, at least I hope I've been able to relate that to our participants today, that is a significant challenge for policing, significant community challenge. And I think all of us have a general understanding of that. A few other things that I think are challenging for law enforcement. A couple of the things that I mentioned, just kind of internal issues, hiring. I mean, hiring is a challenge right now because I think just with some of the things within the past few years socially, that has been seen with law enforcement. I think a lot of people are questioning whether or not they would want to do that job. And so, as I mentioned before, we're seeing our numbers, we're seeing less numbers, less applicants, and that is that's going to continue to be a challenge, I think, moving into the future. And we're going to be working at that as much as we possibly can. After we've come through the pandemic, I think municipalities and counties all at different levels have budgeting issues. And so it's no different for our department as well. I mean, we have significant at times issues when it comes to budgets, always consistently trying to do more with less. And at a time when we're seeing a lot of the issues that we talked about today, mental health, as well as drug dependency, and some of just the social challenges that are being faced in our communities, and the problem solvers being asked to step up and find solutions, and those problem solvers being the police and sheriff's deputies, you know, it's tough to consistently do more with less. So that is something that I see as a challenge as well. Additionally is wellness initiatives for those that have chosen to take on a law enforcement career. There has never been as much light shown on that as there has been in the last couple of years because of a lot of the public scrutiny. There has been a lot of officers across the nation, maybe not so much locally, that are just simply leaving the profession. And a lot of people who just, you know, it's a tough job. And the vast majority, 99%, if not more, are just tremendous people serving their communities. And, you know, we try to highlight a lot of that information on our Facebook page. We have officers that are doing things on a regular basis that, you know, it's because they care. We had an officer that, you know, ended up getting some national attention, an officer that responded to a theft at one of our local stores. And it was somebody experiencing homelessness that just simply they were stealing a hat and gloves. And our officer responded, understood what was going on, and instead of doing, you know, any type of enforcement, just simply bought the hat and gloves for the young person. So there are things like that going on a consistent basis that are happening right here in our own communities. The greater Lacrosse area has just tremendous people that are serving in law enforcement, but that wellness component is something that I see as a challenge going forward, because law enforcement leaders have to pivot and focus on this, and have to find ways to enhance the wellness of their own employees because of the challenges that these officers and deputies are seeing on a regular basis, just by coming in and doing their job for the day. So those are things that we're noticing, and that we are, you know, consistently looking for different opportunities. And you know, again, too, I think one of the challenges is just really establishing trust with our entire community, and those who are, you know, underrepresented and have not, you know, historically had trust in the institution of policing. I see that as a challenge because, you know, the best intended police departments and police officers can't just show up and say, hey, I'm here now and everything's better. We have to work at developing that trust, and we do need the help of our entire community to do that. I think all law enforcement agencies need those conduits to help us establish that trust. And I do want to say that opportunities like this today, being able to speak to this group, you know, this is something that's a benefit for us as law enforcement leaders, to not only get our message out, but really just become, you know, just to be able to speak and learn from each other, and really to kind of humanize who we are as police officers. This community is our community too. This is where we've chosen to live and raise our children, and we want what's best for this entire community. And so these opportunities are good, and we want to work toward that challenge of building that trust with our entire community.
Thank you. Sheriff Wolf?
I think I started out that question, didn't I? I don't remember.
Oh, did you? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you did. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I was
I should apologize. I was probably talking too much, so.
Well, all right. One last question that I have for you, and then we're going to move on to the Q&As. How can our community and our organizations assist you in building and creating a safe environment for both your agencies and for the community? Sheriff Wolf, let's start with you again.
All right. You know, law enforcement has changed over the last several years, but and I've said this to other groups too, but when I first started, we didn't participate in anything, community events. We did our job, we took our calls, we tried to arrest bad people and solve crime and what have you. But over time, it has changed, all for the better. And now, like Chief Kudron talked about, building trust with those we serve, we do a lot of things on a weekly basis. And it isn't just the events, and it's how we handle calls and relate to people, are things that we work on, but all of it with a goal of trying to improve trust to those we serve and reaching out to different groups in our community. We had several people that volunteer their time at the Boys and Girls Club and the Good Fight Club and various other things, all because they want to create a positive image of the profession they do, but also build relationships. And we do take part in several community events, like Chief Kudron, you know, Oktoberfest is a community event that they partner with and build relationships, and you see them doing it wherever you go. And we do that with Country Boom and National Night Out and trick or treat events. And our deputies union has a Cops in the Corn event coming up, and you know, just things like that to build relationships beyond just the DARE program at the school when they're younger. It's building it with adults and getting to know your neighbors and that kind of thing. So how can the community assist us? I think they do, but I think it's law enforcement needs to gain that trust. When there's a bad apple, it does make us all look bad. So we have to work with others and gain the trust and learn from each other on what things we can do to make improvements, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. Police Chief Kudron.
Yeah, thanks. I really have always felt that the community, as well as stakeholders within the community, play such an important role when it comes to policing and safety. And so I think there are a lot of ways that organizations and the community itself can step up to help us as policing agencies, policing our communities. And you know, one of the ways is to help us share our stories. You know, we have an opportunity now with social media to get a lot more messaging out, you know, to the people that are following our social media pages. And we have asked, you know, other places that have followings, you know, a lot of times it's businesses, and we've asked them to help share our story, you know, help us to humanize our officers that are serving here, our officers that you know are here to really do what they can do. Like I had said before, this is their community as well, and they want it to be safe, they want it to be livable, they want it to be a good community. And those are some of the ways that, yes, we have to gain and build that trust, but we also want communities to help us do that. And sharing our message, I think, is important. One of the things that we're working on at the police department in the coming year is our next strategic plan. And we're going to be reaching out to a lot of community stakeholders to assist us. And we're going to be requesting that they complete, it's called a SWOT analysis. It's a few quick questions on, you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats regarding our department, where we go in the future, what's important to our community. And, you know, I would ask if a representative from the league would be willing, we could send that correspondence to you as well, to provide some information back to us as an agency as we move through that strategic planning process. But we want public input. We want to understand and know from the public or the community's point of view what they want to see from the department and what the department can do better to serve their needs. And that's important. And I know that many of those, I guess, kind of opportunities or ideas in terms of service can be lost at times, especially in the national narrative on policing. But here in Lacrosse, that's very, very important. And we do feel we have a very safe community. Sheriff Wolf and I work, hard at connecting the dots and in community engagement so we can consistently keep, our community safe and people thriving here locally. And, really any of the support that our community and organizations can step up and provide is something that's going to be helpful for both of us and our agencies.
Thank you both for your answers, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a break before we move on to the audience questions. Karen would like to mention something else that we can use the Q&A for. Karen?
One quick thing. Thanks, Mary. In addition to posting your questions, thank you for all the great questions that are up there. We are asking you to post any ideas you might have for discussion topic suggestions for a possible follow-up discussion group in the near future related to this. So as soon as the Q&A is done, I'll put up the poll for you to vote on the topic you're interested in. But if you have a suggestion and it's not already up there and we think it'll work, I can try to slip that in there too. If you have a topic suggestion, just simply type discussion topic and then the suggestion to distinguish it from the questions for our speakers. All right, thanks.
I am going to switch everyone to gallery view so that hopefully we can see everybody now. We have a lot of questions, so we take as many as we can. Let's see, right now it is 1:45, so we have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. So Sheriff and Police Chief, whoever you feel, just chime in whenever, if you feel that you know the answer to the question or you'd like to respond, because there's 14 of them. And like I said, I'm just going to go down the row right now. Okay, first question. Do you see any of the long-term trends in the Lacrosse area from both the police and sheriff perspective? Okay, so long-term trends.
I'm not sure exactly what.
I would say, okay, so.
I mean, I see some trends related to drugs and which drugs and how they come here. I see that maybe there might be an increase in violent crime trends. Not really sure how to answer that.
Do you, okay, as far as, so what type of, and I'm just going to suppose here, I am going to assume that this is about the types of crimes or problems that you're seeing in the community. And I think you mentioned the rise in drugs.
I would say drugs. I think there's a trend, obviously, with technology and social media. A lot more crimes are being committed via other resources, which include white collar crimes, credit card frauds. We're seeing way more of that, and theft via the computer versus the old traditional thefts type of thing. So that's a trend that's been on the upswing for several years, and I think it will continue.
And I would mention, kind of in the same lines as Sheriff Wolf, one of the trends with the issue with drugs in our community has been fentanyl, and that's been something that I know has been talked about in our media And I know our Alliance to Heal group that works within the county is really focused on what can be done in that area. And you'll notice that, we have put out, some of the arrests that we've made for people who are dealing fentanyl. And that trend has been one that has gone on now for a few years. And it's been tragic because so many people have overdosed and lost their lives due to fentanyl. And that has been, it's been dealt. That drug has been dealt in our community now for a handful of years. We're seeing more of it, and we're seeing our drug investigators focus on that because of the potency of it and what it's done to families and individuals because of just the addictive nature, but also just the fact that it can take somebody's life. A lot of drugs that people are getting when it comes to heroin and fentanyl, they don't know what they're getting. They don't know the potency factor of what they're putting into their body. But again, as we talked before, they're addicted. They have a substance abuse addiction, and it's become a tragic issue. So that is one trend that unfortunately I do see continuing, and we're working to mitigate that as much as we possibly can. It's really a community issue as well as a law enforcement issue.
Sheriff Wolf, you mentioned that you think that there's going to be an increase in, I guess I would call them cyber crimes. How are your departments ready to handle that sort of issue?
Through training, we got staff that continually receive training on how to investigate various crimes and access information, whether it's from Google or Facebook or what have you. We also have resources that that's what they do at the state level that will assist us on cases. A lot of child crimes are occurring that way. You read about it, unfortunately, every day in the paper that somebody's arrested for meeting somebody that believed to be a child. And so it's just something we have to stay ahead of and keep people trained and learn from previous cases and others that are experienced.
And we also have a group locally that is a task force of sorts with members of different departments, our department, Sheriff's Department, as well as working with the state and federal law enforcement partners for crimes against children, pornography, expletive type activity that people are doing online. Recently, a couple of arrests were made here locally on those types of crimes, search warrants served. One was a federal case, a federal probationer. And so those cases, we have members that are working on these task forces on a daily basis, trying to stop these types of crimes. But we certainly see with just technology increasing, the social media platforms increasing. There's a lot of ways for people to try to facilitate those crimes. And that can also be a financial burden on law enforcement agencies to try to stay, if not ahead, try to stay up to date with the technology and also have the technology tools to solve those crimes. And we work very closely with our DA's office on those cases as well.
Last year, well, the last 2 years almost, have there been any specific issues that your department have seen that just have resulted from the COVID pandemic?
I can start with that one. We certainly have. The COVID pandemic at its, basically at the start, as with the rest of our society, we didn't really know what we were dealing with. So we were being very, very careful in terms of just personal health and hygiene, and then how that related to how we dealt with people within our community. So we had to make a lot of adjustments. We also had to, again, as I talked about budgetary items before, buying machinery that cleans the air and can sterilize our squad cars and sterilize our interview rooms. I mean, those are things that we didn't have to focus on as much as we did during the pandemic, and still have to focus on that. The wearing of masks and just general things that we were looking out for the safety of our community and the safety and well-being of our staff. During that time, we did have staff members that contracted the virus, and we had to look at our staffing levels and different ways of how we interact with one another. Much like today, where we're virtual, we did a lot of virtual meetings over the last couple of years. That also came at a cost as well in terms of software and even the actual hardware of getting more people within our departments laptops so that they could do some of these things. So those have been not only kind of long-lasting effects that we've seen during the pandemic, but also has given all of us an opportunity to look at different ways of doing our job and look at some of the virtualness of training. And I can tell you that's been actually a benefit that we've seen is because of the technology and software that we've been able to institute within our agency. We've been able to do a lot more virtual training and get more information in front of our officers than we would have, let's just say, pre-pandemic. So maybe that's just a tiny little silver lining that's come out of this, but it has nonetheless.
We have a question here about the issue of human trafficking in our city and county. Can you just speak to that, both the sex trafficking and forced labor trafficking?
Shawn, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can talk about this a little bit more. The same task force group that I had talked about before also encompasses some of the human trafficking types of calls. We are working with our federal partners as closely as we can on these types of issues. And these are very difficult, but we look at these from several different standpoints, but collaboration is really the main focus of investigating human trafficking. But there's also a lot of different, I guess, agencies providing information and helping the victims of these types of crime. And those agencies have become really more involved, I would say, in the last few years. And so there is great collaboration in working these cases, but they are difficult. There's no doubt about it. And so we try to stay in front of these as much as we can. Again, using technology and looking at what's happening out there, how people are being lured into this type of criminal environment. It can be difficult, but again, as we try to stretch our resources thin, this is an area that we keep looking toward and keep trying to work at.
All right, it is 12:55. Karen, do you think we have time for another question?
Sure.
All right.
Maybe make it a quick one with quick
Maybe a quick
answers.
one?
I don't know.
All right. What is? Oh, let's see. There are so many good ones here. All right. Okay, body cameras. Is there, do all of the police officers and deputies have body cameras? Are they used? And what would be the, what would the rules for using them be?
I'll let Shawn kind of address that because he's had them for a few years, but we've been in the process for over a year of getting ours, and we're going to soon have them, and probably rely on Lacrosse PD to help us with some of our policy and whatnot. But I would say that all of our staff, we're going to have them both in the jail and our patrol division. Are very excited to have them. They think it only leads to better report writing. It leads to, I mean, you don't have to be as that, you got the video evidence to back up what your report is. You don't have to go into quite so much detail. So we are looking forward. We were told the end of October. I haven't seen anything, but we're soon going to have them. But Shawn's had that bit of technology for a number of years. And
Yeah, so thanks, Sheriff. We are currently on kind of what I guess we would describe as our second generation of body cameras. We started with them a few years ago with a certain vendor and certain brand. We used those, had good luck with them, but there was another vendor that just simply had a much better product that that we went with. Our officers too, all of our officers on the streets have body cameras. Their rules in terms of with their body cameras are whenever they have any type of public engagement, those body cameras are to be operational and be running, recording the interactions that they're having with anyone within our community. Certainly we have to take into account things like when we're at the hospital or if we're at a school or if we're in a kind of a sensitive situation. We do have policies that essentially govern the times when an officer would be allowed to essentially turn the body camera off. But again, that is the exception, and it's not the norm. We have a lot of body camera footage, as you can imagine, that comes from all of our officers every shift, every day of the week. And our officers have been very happy with the product. They very much like having them as well. It's really a tool that has been very beneficial for our community to understand and see what is happening during police contacts and interactions, and something that I'm a big fan of, and I think it's been very good for the Lacrosse community, and it'll be very good for the greater Cooley region as the Sheriff's Department is coming in with them, and I know that surrounding communities as well, if they don't have them, they're working at getting them.
Okay, just one more quick thing. What is the Safe Kids Coalition?
The Safe Kids Coalition is with Human Services, Gunderson Lutheran, and it's a coalition to prevent early childhood accidental injuries, whether it's from car accidents, child safety seats, drowning, pool safety, life jacket, many different topics that a group of stakeholders meet regularly on to see what we can do in our community to keep kids safer on many different topics.
Thank you. All right, we're running out of time, and I want to respect. We're 12:59. I so appreciate your candor and your willingness to come and answer our many questions. In fact, there are lots of other questions, so I may be sending them to your offices, and if you could have somebody give us a quick answer on.
Yep, I was going to tell you if you had any questions, don't be afraid to email. You got both our email addresses. I'd be happy to
Wonderful,
respond.
thank you. Because this is the most questions I've ever seen, so this is great. But I would like to thank you so much for your time and all of your invaluable information and for the service to our community. We so appreciate your efforts in keeping our communities safe. Karen?
All right, thank you. Well, it's time for that poll we talked about. And I guess, do I have to be highlighted, Mary, or how does that work? I'm not sure. I'm a little person, but that's okay. Oh, you're muted, Mary, you're muted. Okay, do I just start?
Okay, yeah, the poll is up right now.
Oh, I will. Okay, I'll go ahead and launch the poll.
Okay.
All right, now, if you're interested in participating in a follow-up evening discussion on one of a number of subtopics related to today's presentation, you can check the box of one that you're most interested in. I did get a couple of suggestions in the Q&A. One was sort of answered already, and one I incorporated into choice number 1. There isn't a 6, I deleted that one. So pick one of these: mental well-being and recidivism, etc., ways for the community to assist the police in fostering safety and trust, comparison of community views and policing views on issues such as substance abuse, gun control, police presence in schools, and effectiveness of incarceration. And all you have to do is click on the one that's of interest to you, and that means that you would like to maybe be in a discussion group. And I did include the person's suggestion about funding for mental health issues in question 1. I added that on at the end there. So I'm just going to wait a half a minute for people to keep clicking, and just let you know, we just did have a really, really good experience at our last discussion groups. If you vote today, we're going to assume that you're interested, and we will be following up with an email to you to let you know what will be happening, if, when, where, and all of the details. So if you want to get that email telling you about the discussion groups, please vote on the choice that's most interesting to you. I have a lot of votes coming in, and it's looking pretty good. Just 10 more seconds, and then I'll end the poll. So if you didn't click yet, click now.
Karen,
All right.
Karen, could I just
Yes.
add one little thing?
Yes.
The League of Women Voters US is going to be having a virtual webinar on community involvement in policing, and it's October 20th. And everybody is invited. You could find information on this webinar on our website. You do need
Awesome.
to register in advance.
All right. Okay, I have ended that poll, and we will take a look at those results and be getting back to you. And I have to share my last slide in a minute, so I don't know if you need to spotlight me or how that works, Mary. But on behalf of the league and our league president, Robin Schmidt, I would also like to thank each of the panelists for not only taking their time to join us today, but for their efforts in keeping our community safe and protecting and serving. We're just so fortunate to have had them here with us today, and we thank them so much. Now I'm going to be doing a screen share if it'll work. Not sure, probably can pop that in. There we go, we're all up, great. To our audience, please join us for our next Lunch and Learn. It is on homelessness in the Lacrosse area. Our panel will include Cheryl Hancock, Lauren Jernot, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Kim Cable, and Julia McDermott, who will share their knowledge and insights on the very crucial issue of homelessness in our community. I just saw a couple of news stories on that today, so I know this is a topic of interest. You can actually register for this program right now on our website. If you go to that Programs and Events button and click on it, you'll be able to get to it and sign up right now. Well, that concludes our October Lunch and Learn. We hope to see you at the November Lunch and Learn, or perhaps at an upcoming discussion group. Also, check out our website to see other ways you can engage. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and thank you for your interest and your support for the Lacrosse Area League of Women Voters. Take care, everyone.